Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Malice in the Mitten. I'm Tracy Preston.
And I'm Christine Mulligan.
And today, we are going into one of the darkest days in Grand Rapids history.
I know the name, but I don't know the full story. And from what you told me right before we started recording, this one is a heavy one.
It is. This is a case that shook an entire city. Not just because of the number of lives taken, but because of how quickly ordinary places became crime scenes. Homes, streets, neighborhoods, a summer afternoon. And before we begin, I want to recognize the listener who brought this case forward to us. This episode was suggested by Tina Hughes. Tina, thank you for trusting us with this story. We know when listeners send us cases, especially Michigan cases, they are not just sending us headlines. They are sending us memories. They are sending us names. They are sending us moments that still sit heavy in a community.
Before we go any further, we do want to give a content warning. Today's episode discusses domestic violence, mass murder, the death of children, gun violence, hostage taking, suicide, and lasting trauma left behind for families, survivors, first responders, and an entire community. This case is deeply painful, and we are going to handle it with care. As always, our goal is to not sensationalize what happened. It is to remember the people who were lost, look carefully at the facts, and talk honestly about the warning signs and systems surrounding this kind of violence. If any part of this episode feels too heavy, please take care of yourself, pause if you need to, step away if you need to. Your safety and peace matter.
And as always, we want to be clear. We are working from publicly available reporting, official statements, court records where available, and documented timelines. We will tell you what is known, what has been reported, and where there are limits in the public record. We are not here to glorify the person responsible. We are here to center the victims, the survivors, and the community that had to live through this. And this one still does.
It's one of the things I think people forget. A case like this doesn't end when the news cycle ends. The people who live near it, the families, the first responders, the city, they carry it forever in their memories.
They sure do. So today, we are going to talk about July 7th, 2011, in Grand Rapids, Michigan. A day when 34-year-old Rodrick Shonte Dantzler killed 7 people. 2 of them were children. Others were women he had once been connected to. Others were family members caught inside the circle of that violence. By the time the day ended, Grand Rapids had witnessed a mass killing, a police pursuit, gunfire in city streets, a hostage situation, and one final act of violence when Dantzler took his own life. But we are not starting with him as the center of this story. We are starting with the people who were lost, because that is where every story like this should begin. There were 7 victims. At home on Brinell Court Northeast, police would find Jennifer Heeren, 29 years old. Jennifer was Dantzler's estranged wife. They would also find Jennifer's 12-year-old daughter, Kamrie Heeren-Dantzler. Jennifer's parents, Thomas Heeren, 51, and Rebecca, 52. At another home on Plainfield Avenue Northeast, police would find Kimberlee Emkens, 23. Kimberlee had once been in a relationship with Dantzler. They would also find Kimberlee's sister Amanda Emkens, 27, and Amanda's young daughter, Marisa Emkens, 10 years old. Some reports list Marisa as 10, while some later summaries have listed her as 11, but the Michigan Public Victim Release identifies her as 10. 7 people, 2 families, 2 homes, 1 city that at first did not yet know the full shape of what was unfolding.
And the fact that they were connected through him having relationships with them, that kind of changes how we need to talk about this.
It does. Because when you look at this case carefully, the violence was not random at its core. Police leader said they believed Dantzler had been targeting former partners and people connected to them. There were random victims later in the day, people shot at or pulled into the chaos, but the first murders appear to have grown out of something much more familiar and much more terrifying: domestic violence, control, rage, separation, and what happens when someone believes that if they cannot control the people around them, they will destroy them instead. That is not drama. That is a pattern. And it is one we have talked about before on this show. The most dangerous moment for many victims of domestic violence is not always when they are inside their relationship. It can be when they try to leave.
Yeah, that's always the thing, is everyone likes the Monday morning quarterback on other people's relationships or other people's situations. They always like to say things like, why didn't she just leave if it was bad, or things of that nature whenever there's a dramatic relationship. But sometimes leaving is exactly when everything becomes much more dangerous.
And it absolutely becomes more dangerous. And we're going to be very careful here. We are not going to say that one factor explains everything Dantzler did. We are not going to pretend we can climb inside his mind and know every thought. Even Grand Rapids Police Chief Kevin Belk later said officials would probably never know with certainty why Dantzler continued through the full rampage. But what we can say is this: there were warning signs. There was a history of violence, and there were women in his life who had reason to fear him. And on January 7th, 2011, that fear became real in the worst possible way. It was a Thursday, early July in Grand Rapids, the kind of day when the city should have been moving through its normal summer rhythm. People at work, kids out of school, families making dinner plans, traffic building as the afternoon moved toward evening. Nothing about the day itself warned people that by nightfall, Grand Rapids would be watching police lights, barricades, breaking news alerts, and neighborhoods sealed off. According to reports, police became involved around 2:30 p.m. after Dantzler's mother contacted authorities. She repeatedly told police that her son had called her and said he had shot his wife. Officers went to his residence on Janes Avenue Northeast, where he had reportedly been living alone after Jennifer and Kamrie had moved out. But when police arrived, he wasn't there.
So, wait a minute. At this time, you're telling me at this moment, they know something has happened, but they don't really know what yet, and that there are multiple scenes. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And that's what makes the early timeline so terrifying. Police are trying to locate him. They're responding to what sounds like a possible domestic homicide, but very quickly the scope changes. Because not long after that initial call, investigators would begin discovering bodies. First, the horror inside homes, then the realization that the man they were looking for was not contained. He was moving, and that meant the danger was moving with him. The first confirmed crime scenes were 2 separate homes on the northeast side of Grand Rapids. one on Plainfield Avenue Northeast, one on Brinell Court Northeast. At Plainfield, the victims were Kimberlee, Amanda, and Marisa Emkens. Kimberlee was only 23. She had reportedly dated Dantzler in the past, though sources noted they had not been in recent contact. Amanda was 27. Marisa was Amanda's little girl. At Brinell Court, the victims were Jennifer Heeren, Jennifer's parents, Thomas and Rebecca, and Jennifer's daughter, Kamrie. Jennifer was 29, Kamrie was 12, Thomas was 51, and Rebecca was 52. That is not just a victim list, that is a family tree cut apart.
And it sounds like he didn't just kill the person he was angry with. He killed all the people around her.
Yeah, he did, and that matters. In domestic violence cases, family members can become targets because they are perceived as helpers, protectors, witnesses, or obstacles. A parent who supports a daughter leaving, a child who represents a bond that the abuser feels entitled to, a former partner who represents rejection, a sister, a mother, a father, a child. People pulled into the line of fire because the violence is not only about anger, it is often about ownership. When ownership is challenged, the violence can expand. Now, later reporting would describe Dantzler as having a long history of violence and instability. Sources reported prior convictions, including domestic violence and property destruction, and multiple protection orders connected to women who feared him. There were also reports of substance use the day of the shootings, including cocaine and alcohol. But again, we have to hold two things at once. Mental health struggles and substance use may be part of a person's history. They do not explain away murder. They do not excuse targeting women. They do not erase the choices made that day.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction to make, because if you just say he snapped, then you miss out on the ability to see the pattern. You miss the danger signs within those patterns.
Exactly. And I do not want this episode to become one of those stories where the murderer is described as if he were a storm system, like he just appeared over Grand Rapids and destroyed everything in his path. No. There was a history. There were people afraid of him. There were relationships marked by violence. There were warning signs, and by the afternoon of July 7th, those warning signs had become crime scenes. One of the things that makes this case so difficult is how quickly it widened. After the murders at the homes, the city still did not have him in custody. Grand Rapids police were looking for a man who had already killed 7 people, and he was armed. According to later official reporting from the U.S. Attorney's Office, the weapon used was a Glock 9mm semi-automatic pistol. The same source stated that Dantzler used it to kill his wife, his 12-year-old daughter, his in-laws, former girlfriend, that girlfriend's sister, and her 10-year-old daughter. And then the violence spilled onto the road. A man named Robert Poor was shot during what has been described as an apparently random road rage incident near Godfrey Avenue and Oxford Street Southwest. Reports state he was spared more serious injury because the bullet was deflected by a titanium plate in his nose.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And that detail was almost hard to process because by then, this is no longer hidden behind closed doors. The violence had entered public space. A driver, a street, a person who had no idea he was about to cross paths with a man who had already left 7 people dead. That is when a private nightmare becomes a city-wide emergency. Now, for listeners who know Grand Rapids, Picture the geography of fear expanding. Plainfield Avenue, Brinell Court, Janes Avenue, Godfrey and Oxford. These are not abstract points on a map. They are neighborhoods. They are roads people take to work. Places where someone's child rides in the back seat. Places where someone stops for gas, turns a corner, answers a phone call. And on that day, the city began to understand that danger was not standing still.
And of course, that's the scariest part for the public. Not knowing where he is, what he's doing, where he's going, why he's doing any of this, but knowing what has already done. That's scary.
Yeah, it is. And that uncertainty matters. Because when law enforcement is trying to contain a moving suspect, every minute changes the risk. The question is not only, where is he? It is, who is near him right now? And with Dantzler, that question kept getting worse. By the early evening, he was still moving through Grand Rapids, still armed, still not in custody, and more people were about to be pulled into the path of a man who had already destroyed 2 families. But before we move into the chase, the gunfire, and the hostage situation, we need to sit for a moment with the people inside the homes, because this is where the public record gives us names, ages, relationships, and addresses, but families lose more than facts. They lose voices. They lose inside jokes and birthdays and ordinary arguments that suddenly become precious because there will never be another one. They lose the chance to say, "Come on over this weekend." They lose the sound of someone walking through that door. They lose the future. Jennifer Heeren was 29. Kamrie Heeren-Dantzler was 12. Thomas Heeren was 51. Rebecca Heeren was 52. Kimberlee Emkens was 23. Amanda Emkens was 27. Marisa Emkens was 10. There are the 7 names at the center of this story. Not the chase, not the standoff, not the shooter. Them.
I'm glad you're naming them this early, because in cases like this, the spectacle of it all can swallow the victims and their histories.
And we are not going to let that happen. This is one of those cases where the later events are dramatic. The police pursuit, the crash, the hostages, the final hours, the negotiations. But none of that should pull our focus away from the people who did not get to walk out of those homes. And when we talk about the rest of this timeline, we are going to keep coming back to that, because the citywide crisis began with intimate violence, and that matters. There's another layer here as well. In the aftermath, people would ask the questions they always ask after a mass killing. How did this happen? Could anyone have stopped him? Were there missed warning signs? Why did he have access to a gun? Were the women who had feared him still vulnerable to him? Why did the system see pieces of the danger but not stop the whole thing before it exploded? And those are not easy questions. And in some cases, there may not be clean answers, but they are the questions we owe the victims.
And that's where the awareness piece is so important, because it's not about making people paranoid. It's about helping people recognize patterns before they turn deadly.
That's exactly right. We are not telling the story to create fear for fear's sake. We are telling it because sometimes danger has a history. Sometimes the person who becomes the headline has already left a trail. Sometimes the people closest to that person have already been trying to tell the world something is wrong here. And sometimes, by the time everyone else sees it, it's already too late. On July 7th, 2011, Grand Rapids was still trying to catch up to what had happened. Police had multiple dead, a suspect at large, a city on alert, and as the afternoon shifted toward evening, Rodrick Dantzler was no longer only a suspect in 2 homes, he was a moving threat. The next part of this story would unfold across city streets, highways, police radio, and the terrified seconds of strangers who suddenly found themselves inside a nightmare they never saw coming. And that is where we will go next. Because by the time Grand Rapids saw the flashing lights and heard the sirens, the worst had already happened inside those homes, but the danger was not over. Not yet. And the man police believed responsible was not barricaded somewhere. He was not waiting at one scene. He was not contained. He was moving.
And that's a terrifying shift, because now it's not only about what had already happened, it's about what might happen next.
Exactly. And that is where this case turns from a private horror into a public emergency. At first, officers were responding to the report that Rodrick Dantzler had called his mother and said he had shot his wife. Police went to his home on James Avenue Northeast, but he was not there. Soon after, the 2 murder scenes were discovered, one on Plainfield, one on Brinell. Streets were closed, residents nearby were told to stay inside their home. But even as officers were securing those scenes, Dantzler had already moved beyond them. And that is the nightmare of a moving suspect. Every address becomes a question. Every intersection becomes a possible point of contact. Every person on the road has no idea they may be seconds away from danger. Around 3 p.m., another person was shot. His name was Robert Poor. He was near Godfrey Avenue and Oxford Street Northwest when Dantzler fired at him with what had been described as an apparent random road rage shooting. Poor survived in part because the bullet was deflected by that titanium plate in his nose.
That detail is crazy to me. It is unbelievable. I mean, this guy was just out living his life, had no idea he was about to cross paths with somebody who had already killed 7 people. But yet, let me stop and just say, I'm sure how he got that titanium plate in his head was a catastrophe and a trauma in and of itself. I'm sure. I'm imagining, of course. But who would have thunk that trauma that guy must have in the past went through to get the titanium plate in his nose, that would save his life down the road? Can we just talk about that for a second? How crazy is that?
It's totally bonkers. Talk about trauma times 2.
I know, but the thing is that to me is screaming for me to point out that is a perfect example of when people think that their life is completely destroyed for something. And aside from the story that we're talking about right now, I just want to focus 1 second on how that is a shining example of, you think life is bad, but everything that happens for you, not to you. That's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, no doubt. Like, whatever trauma that guy suffered before was meant to be in place because of this upcoming trauma.
Exactly. This poor guy, I mean, he's living a path that I necessarily wouldn't want to live, but good on him, because that is some shit. That is some shit to have a plate in your face that saves your life.
No doubt.
Down the road. Okay.
It's insane.
Right. I know. I'll let that go for a minute, but I couldn't let it go for too much longer. Like, the plate in the nose that saves his brain from a bullet. Amazing. Unbelievable.
Totally bonkers.
I hope this guy lives the rest of his life in peace and harmony, because he deserves it.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Now back to the story. I'm sorry to deviate, but...
No, it was definitely required.
Yeah, exactly.
At some point after the shootings, Dantzler was driving a Lincoln Town car, which later he abandoned that vehicle and carjacked a Chevrolet Suburban. And that matters because a vehicle change can throw off a search. You are not just looking for one person anymore. You are looking for a person in a specific car. Then suddenly, that car changes. Descriptions shift, dispatch updates. officers have to adjust. And anyone listening for one vehicle may not realize the danger is now inside another.
And that adds a whole nother frantic layer to it all, because every minute he's changing location, he's changing direction, he may be changing vehicles. The danger spreads and nobody knows anything.
Yeah, it's insane. And this is where Grand Rapids becomes part of the story. It's not just a setting as a city trying to absorb fear in real time. People were being told to stay inside. Streets were blocked. Police were moving between scenes. News was breaking, but no one outside the investigation could fully know what was coming next. And if you lived in Grand Rapids that day, especially near the northeast side, that fear had a physical shape. It was a closed road, a helicopter, a siren, a neighbor calling to ask if you were okay, a news alert that made your stomach drop. Now, we talk a lot on Malice and the Mitten about the moment when danger stops being theoretical. This is one of those moments. Before that day, Rodrick Dantzler's history existed in records, memories, police reports, protection orders, past convictions, family concerns, and the fears of women who knew what he was capable of. But on July 7th, 2011, that history came out into the open, and Grand Rapids had to face it all at once.
Yeah, and that's an important point, because the violence didn't come from nowhere. The public may have experienced it suddenly, but the people closest to him, they may have been living with warning signs way, way before that day.
That's right. And when we talk about warning signs, I want to be careful. Warning signs are not magic. They do not always tell us exactly what someone will do. They do not make the future easy to predict. And they are not meant to blame victims or families for what they could not control. But warning signs do matter. A history of domestic violence matters. Threats matter. Protection orders matter. Escalation matters. And a person losing access to control can matter. And when someone with a violent history begins spiraling around separation, rejection, or perceived abandonment, that is not something to shrug off. Later reporting described police as believing Dantzler was hunting former girlfriends and relatives. And that word is hard to hear, but it reflects how investigators understood the targeted nature of the early murders. And when you hear that, it reframes the entire first half of the day. This was not a man randomly walking into public places. This began with people he knew, people connected to women he had relationships with, people inside homes where they should have been safe.
And let me just add that warning signs are easy to Monday morning quarterback, but that's really not the point. And essentially, that's how we kind of got into doing this podcast in the first place. At least for my portion, I know you're into the whole crime of it all, and we're both into what makes people tick, what makes people do the things that they do. But the thing about warning signs, aka patterns, and the beautiful thing about talking about things like this and getting the conversation started externally from the situations that happen, is to help everyone else see those patterns. So going forward, those patterns can be obvious before things like this happen. And we can all know a little bit more about what makes people snap, or, you know, the mind frame of all the different diagnoses that we talk about when associating to psychopaths or people that, you know, kind of go off kilter. It's to share the patterns and to go a little bit deeper into why things like this happen, and less of Monday morning quarterbacking, because everything's 20/20 hindsight, right?
Sure is.
Everything is clear to see. But the thing is when it's happening, while it's happening, and like you said, the domestic violence, the threats, the protection orders, all of the escalation that happens in all of these different budding patterns. This is what the rest of us in the collective need to talk about and need to be coherent of, so we can see them, so we can be better at stopping things like this happening in our society. But going back to this immediate story, you were saying how this situation began with people that he knew. And the problem is once he was moving through the city, everyone else became vulnerable beyond the people that he knew.
That's right. And he wasn't done yet. By early evening, the city still did not have him in custody. And then, around 7 p.m., another call came in. A woman named April Swanson, described in reporting as a friend of Dantzler's, contacted police. She reported that he was following her car. Then, near Fulton Street and Division Avenue, he shot her from his vehicle. She suffered a serious but non-life-threatening arm injury, and he also fired into a passing pickup truck, though the people inside were not injured.
But there you go. There's another woman that he knows being targeted. But then the next truck, he didn't know them. They were in the frame of his rampage.
Yeah. Now, April survived, but she was now part of a day where Dantzler's violence continued to move through women connected to him and then spill outward into strangers around them. Now, imagine being in traffic near Fulton and Division at that moment. You hear gunfire, you see a vehicle, maybe you see police. Maybe you do not know what is happening yet. Maybe you only know that something is wrong and suddenly normal rules of the road do not apply anymore. Then police intervened. Officers rammed Dantzler's vehicle. There was an exchange of gunfire. No officers were shot. And from there, the pursuit moved through Grand Rapids. Now, this is part of the case many people remember from the news coverage. The chase, the police vehicles, the desperate attempt to stop him before anyone else could be hurt. But when we talk about that pursuit, I want us to remember something. Police were not chasing a headline. They were chasing a man they believed had already killed 7 people and wounded others. Every decision had consequences. Every intersection mattered. Every second he remained mobile was another second someone else could die.
That must have been terrifying for officers too, though, because they had to stop him, but they also had to protect everyone else around them.
Right. A pursuit through a city is never simple. You have civilians, traffic, pedestrians, businesses, homes, visibility, speed, gunfire. And in this case, a suspect who had shown he was willing to shoot from inside a vehicle. So the chase was not just about catching him. It was about containing the threat before the city lost more people. The pursuit took officers through downtown Grand Rapids. Dantzler drove onto Interstate 196, then toward US 131, and later onto Interstate 96. At one point, he crossed the median and drove eastbound in the westbound lanes before crashing into a freeway ditch around 7:15 p.m. And that is 15 minutes that must have felt endless for police, for dispatch, for the people on the roads, for families watching the news and wondering if their loved ones were anywhere near that chase, and for a city that had already been wounded before most people even understood how badly.
Yeah, driving on the interstate in the wrong direction, that is always complete chaos.
And it shows how close this came to becoming even worse. Wrong way interstate driving creates danger for everyone around the vehicle. Other drivers may have seconds to react. They may not even understand what they are seeing at first. A car coming at them, police behind it. There's gunfire in the history of that chase, and no one on the road knows whether they are about to become the next victim. Then, Dantzler crashed. For a moment, you might think that would end it. The vehicle is disabled, police are close, the chase is over, but this case did not end in that ditch. Dantzler got out and ran. On foot, he entered a home on Rickman Avenue Northeast. Inside that home were people who had no connection to him whatsoever. They were not former partners. They were not relatives. They were not people from his past. They were strangers, and suddenly, they became hostages.
That is horrifying. They survived the citywide chase, and then these innocent people are pulled into the final part of it inside of their own home.
I know, I just could not even imagine. Inside that Rickman Avenue home, 3 people were about to live through the longest hours of their lives. And inside, an entire city held its breath. Their names were Joyce Bean, Steve Helderman, and Meg Holmes. They were simply inside a home when a man who had already killed 7 people came through the door.
And that is what makes that part so terrifying. They weren't involved in any of the history of any of this. They didn't know any of the warning signs. They didn't see any of the patterns. They were just sitting in their home.
Right, and that word home matters so much here. Because home is supposed to be the place where the outside world stays outside. It is supposed to be where you let your shoulders drop, where you lock the door and think, okay, I'm safe now. But for the people inside that house, safety broke open without warning. Official later reporting from the United States Attorney's Office described this final stage plainly. After killing 7 people, shooting at others, attempting to kill police officers, and fleeing at high speeds, Dantzler kidnapped 3 hostages before taking his own life. Now think about how fast that shift would have happened. One moment, the chase is outside, police, sirens, the sounds of a pursuit moving through the neighborhood, and then, suddenly, the danger is not in the street anymore. It's inside your house.
Yeah, and once he's inside with hostages, everything also changes for the police.
It sure does, because the mission changes. Moments earlier, officers were trying to stop a moving suspect. Once hostages are involved, the priority becomes preserving life inside that house. That means slowing everything down. It means negotiating. It means creating distance when every instinct might be screaming to rush in. It means trying to keep 3 innocent people alive while dealing with a man who already shown he was willing to kill people closest to him and strangers in his path. Now, this is one of the hardest parts of a hostage situation to understand from the outside. People watching at home may ask, why don't they just go in? But police do not get to make that decision in a vacuum. They have to weigh the danger of action against the danger of waiting. Consider where the hostages are positioned, whether the suspect can see the entry points, whether he is armed and where the weapon is, whether there are children in the home, whether the hostages are injured, or whether the suspect is speaking, escalating, calming, bargaining, threatening, or spiraling. And every choice has a cost.
It's likely the whole city wants it over by now, but the people inside need time to handle everything carefully.
Yeah, and the city wanted an ending. The hostages needed survival, and those 2 things are not always the same. Negotiators began speaking with Dantzler. According to reporting from the night of the standoff, Grand Rapids Police Chief Kevin Belk said Dantzler released a 53-year-old female hostage unharmed after negotiations. The release came after an agreement with authorities, and Belk said Dantzler upheld that part of the agreement. That hostage was Joyce Bean. Reports later stated Joyce was released around 9:30 p.m. and Dantzler was given cigarettes and Gatorade by police. And I want to pause on that detail because at first it may sound strange. Cigarettes, Gatorade. Small items in the middle of a massive police emergency. But in negotiation, small things can become tools. They can buy time. They can create a moment of compliance. They can give negotiators something to trade for a human life. And in this case, Joyce Bean walked out alive.
And that makes you think about it differently. It's not giving him what he wants as a reward. It's using whatever leverage exists in the moment that it's existing to get someone out of that kind of situation.
That's right. And in a hostage situation, the goal is not pride. It is not punishment in that moment. It is not proving a point. The goal is life. And if a bottle of Gatorade and cigarettes help open a door and bring one hostage out, then that is not weakness. That is strategy. But even after Joyce Bean was released, the danger inside that house was not over. Steve Helderman and Meg Holmes were still inside. Dantzler continued talking with police, and according to summaries of the standoff, he was distraught and contemplating suicide. And that is another difficult layer. Because by then, Dantzler had already caused irreversible harm. 7 people were dead, others injured, a city locked in fear, and now negotiators were trying to manage a man who was armed, cornered, emotionally unstable, and now with hostages.
Yeah, and that has to be such a delicate, terrifying balance, because if he turns the gun on himself, he could also turn it on them first.
Exactly. A suicidal hostage taker is not only a danger to himself, he may see the hostages as leverage. He may see them as witnesses. He may see them as people to take with him. Or he may simply be so unstable that no one can protect what the next second looks like. So negotiators had to keep him talking. And talking is not passive. Talking in that situation is work. It is containment and pressure release. It is a way to keep a person's focus on the phone instead of the trigger. Outside of the house, Grand Rapids waited. Police vehicles surrounded the area. Tactical teams were positioned. Neighbors were evacuated or locked down. And news crews were reporting. Families across the city were trying to understand what had happened inside the 2 homes earlier that day, and somewhere, the families of Jennifer, Kamrie, Thomas, Rebecca, Kimberlee, Amanda, and Marisa were either being notified or living through the first impossible hours of grief. That is something we must hold on to here. Because while the standoff was unfolding, the loss had already happened. 7 people were already gone. The hostage situation was not the beginning of the tragedy. It was the final crisis of a day that had already devastated 2 families.
That thought is super painful. The city's not just watching the standoff the whole time, but behind all of that, families are just beginning the worst night of their lives.
And for first responders, this was not one call. It was scene after scene. A report from a mother, a house where no one was found, then bodies, then another house, then a shooting on the road, then another woman shot, then gunfire with police, a chase, a crash, then hostages. This is what trauma can look like for a city's emergency response system. Not one emergency, but a chain of emergencies that just keeps changing shape. Now, inside the Rickman Avenue house, the clock kept ticking. It was now hours after the first call, and after 11 p.m., the final moments came. Reports state that around 11:30 p.m., Dantzler fatally shot himself in the head while inside the house, hiding in a closet with Steve Helderman. Helderman reportedly turned his head just before the shot so he would not have to see it. Meg Holmes was also in the room.
And that must have been horrific for them. Even surviving it, that is something a person will carry forever.
And that scene just keeps flashing in my eyes. I just couldn't imagine being Mr. Helderman right next to this guy who just shot himself in the head. It's insane. Now, survival does not mean untouched. It doesn't mean okay. Survival means your body made it out, but your mind may still be inside that room for a very long time. For Steve Helderman and Meg Holmes, the end of the standoff meant they were alive, but it also meant they had been forced into the final scene of someone else's violence. They had heard the negotiations. They had lived under the threat of a gun. They had been trapped with a man who had already killed 7 people, and then they were present when he died. That is trauma, layered on trauma. Now, after the gunshot, officers moved in. The hostages were freed. The immediate danger was finally over. But Grand Rapids was left with the aftermath. 8 people now were dead, including Dantzler. 2 had been wounded by gunfire. 3 hostages survived. And a city that had started that Thursday like any other day was now the site of one of the worst mass killings in Michigan history. Now, there is something unsettling about the way this case ends, not because justice was denied in a courtroom. There would be no trial for Rodrick Dantzler, no guilty plea, no sentencing hearing, no victim impact statements spoken to the person responsible, no long public process where the facts are laid out piece by piece in front of a jury. He died that night inside the hostage house, and with him died any chance of a full explanation from the person who committed the murders.
And that has to be hard for all the families, because even if a trial doesn't heal anything, it at least creates a record. It gives people a place to speak.
And a trial does not bring anyone back. It does not undo the crime, but it can give families a formal place to be heard. It can force evidence into the light. It can answer some questions, and it can establish publicly and officially what happened. In this case, the public record exists through police investigation, reporting, official statements, and later court proceedings connected to the gun. But the man who carried out the killings was never put on the stand. He never had to sit in a courtroom while the names of the victims were spoken. He never had to hear the full weight of what he stole. And that matters. Because when someone kills themselves after taking innocent lives, the families are left with grief and anger and questions that have nowhere to go. Why them? Why that day? Why did no one stop him sooner? What did he say in those last hours? Did he understand what he had done? Did he even care? And the hardest one, could anything have prevented it?
And that is a haunting question, because it's impossible to answer cleanly. It'll never be answerable, but you still have to ask it.
You do, and we will. But we have to ask it carefully, because prevention is not about blaming victims. It is not about blaming families who are afraid. It is not about saying one person should have seen everything coming. Prevention, again, is about patterns, systems, access, escalation, accountability, and whether warning signs were treated with the seriousness they deserved. Now, in the days after the shootings, Grand Rapids would begin grieving publicly. Flowers would appear, vigils would be held, neighbors would talk about fear and loss. The police department would receive public thanks for ending the standoff without losing more innocent people. But underneath all of that was a deeper wound, because what happened on July 7th was not only a mass shooting, it was also a domestic violence mass killing. And that distinction matters.
Because when people hear mass shooting, they picture a one-of-a-kind event, but that's never the case. And this one started with intimate partner violence.
That's right. And that is where we are going next. We are going to step back from the timeline and look at the pattern around Rodrick Dantzler before July 7th, 2011, his history, the protection orders, the prior violence, the women who feared him, the gun used in the murders, and the question that sits at the center of so many domestic violence cases. When danger leaves a trail, who is responsible for seeing it? For Joyce Bean, Steve Helderman, and Meg Holmes, the Rickman Avenue house became the place where the rampage ended. But for the families of 7 people murdered that day, nothing ended there. Their grief was just beginning. And Grand Rapids would have to face not only what happened, but what had been there all along. When a case ends the way this one ended, it can leave behind a terrible kind of silence.
That has to be one of the hardest parts for the families, because they are left with the loss, but not the process that might have helped lay everything out.
And we have to be careful here because it is tempting, after something this horrifying, to search for one clean explanation. That one moment, the one trigger, the one reason. But violence like this usually does not come from one isolated spark. A history that, when you look back, raises the same painful question over and over again. Who saw the danger? And what could anyone do with what they saw? In Dantzler's case, the public record points to a long history of violence and legal trouble before July 7th. Reports describe criminal history beginning when he was just a teenager, including burglary or breaking and entering charges as a juvenile. Later reporting also described charges and convictions involving domestic violence, assault, and property destruction. One contemporary account stated his legal trouble began at age 15 and included multiple domestic violence and assault-related charges by the time he was 21.
And that's always an infuriating part of looking back on a perpetrator's history, especially when they have a long history of stuff. It's infuriating because you want to be like, why didn't someone stop this before it happened? Unfortunately, it's not always a clean-cut path to this kind of nonsense. But this was not someone with no documented history.
No, and that matters. Not because a past charge tells us exactly what someone will do in the future, because it does not. But when you see repeated violence, threats, domestic abuse, and escalation, those are not small details. Those are pieces that help us understand the risk picture. And in Dantzler's history, there were women who were afraid of him. Reports stated that multiple women, including his own mother, had sought protection orders against him over the years. Some reporting described women fearing violence, threats, and destruction of their property. And that is where this story becomes bigger than one day. Because before Grand Rapids knew him as a mass killer, some people knew him as a man who frightened them. And that is often how intimate partner violence hides in plain sight. To the public, danger may seem sudden, but to the people closest to it, it may have been building for years.
And that's an important line of distinction, because from the outside, people say, how can anyone know? But sometimes there are people who did know the pieces. They just didn't know how bad it could get.
Right, and we need to say this clearly. Knowing someone is dangerous does not mean you can predict a mass killing. A protection order does not create a shield around a person. Leaving an abusive relationship does not instantly make someone safe. Calling police does not guarantee the danger stops, and a family being afraid does not mean they have the power to contain the person they fear. So when we talk about warning signs, we are not putting responsibility on victims. We are looking at the pattern because patterns are how communities, courts, families, workplaces, police, and systems can sometimes intervene before the worst happens. Dantzler's estranged wife, Kamrie Heeren, had reportedly moved out with her daughter, Kamrie, before the killings. Public summaries state that Jennifer was planning to separate from him, and police later believed the pending separation may have been a key factor in the shooting spree. And that point is critical, because separation can be one of the most dangerous periods in an abusive relationship. When someone who has relied on control feels that control slipping away, the risk can escalate. Not always, and not in every case, but often enough that advocates, law enforcement, and survivors know to take it seriously.
And that changes the way we talk about it. That changes the way we talk about just leaving. Because leaving can be brave, but it can also be incredibly dangerous.
And most of the time it is. You know, when people say, why didn't she leave? That's the wrong question to be asking. The better question is, what happens when she tries? Who helps her? Who believes her? Who understands the danger? Who has the authority to remove weapons? Who has the resources to protect her, her children, and the people helping her? Because in this case, Dantzler did not only kill Jennifer, he killed Kamrie. He killed Jennifer's parents, Thomas and Rebecca. And at another home, he killed Kimberlee Emkens, a former girlfriend, along with Amanda Emkens and Amanda's daughter, Marisa. This was violence aimed not just at an intimate partner, but at the family circles around them. And that is why this case cannot be reduced to the phrase shooting spree. I mean, it was a shooting spree. It was also a mass killing. But at its center, it was domestic violence that just widened. It widened into family violence, into public violence, and into a city-wide emergency. And by the time Grand Rapids saw the helicopters, the lights, and the breaking news alerts, the private danger had already become public catastrophe.
And that framing feels really important because it keeps the victims at the center, but it also shows the pattern instead of treating this like a random chaos.
And now we have to talk about the gun. Now, the weapon used in the murders was identified by federal prosecutors as a Glock 9mm semi-automatic pistol. In 2014, the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Michigan stated that Dantzler used that Glock to kill his wife, his 12-year-old daughter, his mother and father-in-law, a former girlfriend, that former girlfriend's sister, and the sister's 10-year-old daughter. The same release stated he also shot at another driver, attempted to kill police officers, fled at high speeds, and kidnapped 3 hostages before taking his own life. But that federal case was not against Dantzler. It was against Michael James Allen, the man accused of selling him the firearm. I think this is incredible. Federal prosecutors said Allen sold the Glock Model 19 9mm semi-automatic pistol to Dantzler, who was a felon, and therefore prohibited from having it. Allen was charged with selling or otherwise disposing of a firearm to a felon and later pleaded guilty.
That is interesting. So even after Dantzler died, there was still accountability connected to how he got the gun because he was already a felon. I kind of low-key love that.
I know.
Because that's the thing, is it's not about guns. It's about the people that have the guns, which it's also about the people who enable those people to have the guns, which is where a lot of our, let me be careful how I phrase this, but society at large, we can't agree on how to manage it. And one side likes to say the other side just doesn't want anybody to have them, but that's not the thing, is we just want, we see how I put myself in there, because I got guns. The thing is I want to hold everybody accountable for everyone that has any kind of say-so about who has guns or not. So it's all about being a little bit more conscientious. So you got my ears perked up about this.
I can tell.
the accountability being connected to the person that initially furnished the gun to someone that shouldn't have had the gun in the first place, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I know it seems like a stretch. Some people might disagree with me that that's a stretch, but in this case, there's onus to that.
100%. I mean, if you're going to be in the business of selling guns, you have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to make sure you're selling a gun or guns to a responsible gun owner.
Yes.
Yeah. In a 2014 fact sheet on Michigan domestic violence and guns, the Center for American Progress reported that women are at a significant risk in domestic violence homicides, and that firearms played a major role in those deaths in Michigan during the years studied. The fact sheet stated that from 2003 to 2012, 258 female homicide victims in Michigan were killed as a result of domestic violence, and that 53.5% of female domestic violence homicide victims in Michigan were killed with a gun.
Of course, those are all chilling statistics because this case feels extreme, but the pattern behind it is unfortunately not rare at all. And I'm gonna leave all that alone, Trace, because I feel like you're trying to goat me into this whole feminism, what in the actual WTF is happening and why none of this is getting taken seriously. We just keep adding to the statistics.
Right.
So I'm gonna stop there about all of what you just said. But yeah, the patterns are not rare enough. Okay?
Okay. I love getting you fired up. Now, the number of victims in this case was extreme. The citywide chase and hostage standoff were extreme. But the roots, domestic violence, separation, threats, access to a weapon, people afraid before the public knew to be afraid, those are not unfamiliar. And that is why we tell stories like this with care. Because the lesson is not be afraid of everyone. The lesson is pay attention when someone tells you they are afraid. Pay attention when an abusive person escalates, when threats become specific, when separation begins, when weapons are involved. And do not confuse "he has never done that before" with "he would never do that." After July 7th, Grand Rapids grieved publicly. Flowers and memorials appeared. A candlelight vigil was held at Anab Awen Park near the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Museum. Hundreds attended. Community services and funerals followed for the victims. The city also publicly recognized the police response, and the residents expressed both grief and gratitude in the days after the rampage. But public mourning is only the visible part. Behind it are the private rituals of grief, the unopened bedroom door, the voicemail you cannot delete, the school desk that stays empty, the holiday table with too many missing chairs, and the birthdays that still come every year, the family photographs that become evidence of what was taken.
And two of the victims were children. That grief has a different kind of weight.
It does. Kamrie was 12 and Marisa was 10. They were just children, not symbols or statistics. Children. They should have had first dances, school milestones, inside jokes, messy bedrooms, favorite songs, summer plans, and futures that stretched far beyond that July day. And the adults killed, Jennifer, Thomas, Rebecca, Kimberlee, Amanda, they should have had ordinary times too. That is what murder steals. Not just life in the broad sense, it steals the ordinary. The coffee in the morning, the text that says, "I'm running late," family recipes, nicknames, arguments that do not matter until you would give anything to have one more. And the survivors, Robert Poor, April Swanson, Joyce Bean, Steve Helderman, Meg Holmes, the officers, dispatchers, neighbors, witnesses. The story did not end when Dantzler died. Survivors of violence often live with before and after. Before the sound, before the phone call, the gun, before the door opened, before the police lights, and before the moment they realize they may not make it out alive. And after? After is where people have to keep living.
Yeah, and that's the part that other people don't see. It's after the news vans leave.
Right. News coverage ends, court filings close, anniversaries pass, but trauma keeps its own calendar. A siren can bring it all back. A street name can bring it back. A July evening can bring it back. A child turning the age someone never reached can bring it back. That is the long shadow of a case like this. So what do we take from this? We take the names, we take the pattern, we take the uncomfortable truth that domestic violence can become mass violence. We take the knowledge that leaving can become dangerous and that survivors need real support, not judgment. We take the reminder that protection orders and criminal histories are warning lights, not paperwork to be ignored. We take the reality that firearm access can turn threats into funerals. And we take the responsibility to listen when someone says, I am afraid of him.
That's a big line right there. Biggest line of the whole episode.
I think it is, because so many tragedies have that sentence somewhere in the background. Maybe spoken out loud, maybe whispered, written in a report, said to a friend, carried silently because the person was afraid no one would believe them. That sentence should change the room, should change the response, should make people slow down and take the threat seriously. Not because every fear becomes a murder, but because every life deserves protection before it becomes a memorial. On July 7, 2011, 7 people were murdered in Grand Rapids. Jennifer Heeren, Kamrie Heeren-Dantzler, Thomas Heeren, Rebecca Heeren, Kimberlee Emkens, Amanda Emkens, Marisa Emkens. Their names belong at the center of the story. And if we remember anything else, let it be this. The violence did not begin when the city heard the sirens. The sirens came after the warning signs, after the fear, after the history, and after the women who had already known danger by name. And sometimes healing begins with telling the truth plainly. This was not just a man who snapped. This was not just a rampage. This was not just one terrible day. This was a pattern that became a massacre. And the people who died deserve more than a headline. They deserve to be remembered as human beings. They deserve to have the warning signs examined. They deserve to have the story told with care. And they deserve a world where I'm afraid of him is never treated like background noise.
Exactly. And before we close, we want to leave you with resources. If you or someone you love is experiencing domestic violence, you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. You can also visit thehotline.org for chat and safety planning resources. The hotline offers free, confidential support 24/7.
And if you are in emotional distress, thinking about suicide, worried about someone else, or in any kind of mental health crisis, call or text 988 to reach the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You can also chat through 988lifeline.org.
For sexual assault support, contact RAIN, National Sexual Assault Hotline. That's RAINN, National Sexual Assault Hotline, at 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-4673. Or visit RAINN, RAINN, michigan.org hotline for online chat.
And for Michigan listeners, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services has a victim services search tool where you can look for domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, legal assistance, and culturally specific services near you. But if you are in immediate danger, call 911. And please remember this: needing help does not mean you failed. It means you are still here and you deserve support. For Jennifer, Kamrie, Thomas, Rebecca, Kimberlee, Amanda, and Marisa, we say your names. We hold the weight of what happened, and remember that behind every case file is a family that never got to go back to normal. And this is why the story matters. Not because of the man who ended it in violence, but because of the people whose lives were stolen before the world had the chance to know them fully. I'm Tracy Preston.
And I'm Christine Mulligan.
And this is Malice in the Mitten,
where the story matters.
but the truth matters more.